Hello and welcome back for the third session of today's panels. So we're going to be having a session on the question of mobilisation. My name's Hamish Mundell. I'm once again of the RUSI Military Sciences team. What is mobilisation? Well, the question is more than putting a rifle in the hands of the men and women on our streets and putting them in uniform and sending them on their way. We're going to really get into the real human organisational question of the 4B method, how to mobilise, build, buy, borrow and bridge, as we've been given by our Cold Air colleagues. And with us today we have a fantastic panel. We will be covering this session. So first to my right, General Yuri Ratasalo, Commander of the Karelian Brigade and Representative of the National Defence University of Finland. So the General has an extensive military CV accompanied by an accomplished academic career, and he'll be giving us the Finnish perspective on mobilisation. And with us also is Greta Tuuskute, apologies for British pronunciation, who's a senior advisor to NATO and the Lithuanian delegation. Greta has an extensive career in public policy and defence, and we're now looking forward to receiving some of the wisdom of that. With us also is Professor Paul Jorion, joining us from the world of academia. Professor Jorion has a multidisciplinary background. He's a renowned scholar whose work spans social theory, anthropology, economics and artificial intelligence. And I think we will look forward to the challenge that he will bring coming from what I think he would describe as outside the traditional defence domain. The way the panel is going to be set, we're going to speak for, each panelist will speak for about 5 to 10 minutes. Then we'll go into a little bit of back and forth and hopefully open up the questions to everyone, wrapping up just before the hour mark. Without further ado, General, over to you.
Well, thank you so much for that kind introduction, and also very much thank you for the organizers of this conference for allowing me to speak in this panel. Hamish asked me to talk a little bit about the mobilization in the Finnish society, and when I look at it personally, I'm gonna introduce you two things that I think are really important to understand how we are preparing and how our society is preparing for different kind of crisis scenarios, including war. First of those is compulsory military service that we have in use for all males in Finland, and second is kind of what we used to call total defense in the Cold War times that we today call comprehensive security model. And together these two, I think, are the kind of the essence of our society's ways and means to mobilize for war and crisis. And then finally I will just make some brief conclusions about societal mobilization in Finland and what I think that the Finnish story could also tell you coming from other countries. So first of all, going to the compulsory military service, it is of course a personnel management thing, getting enough troops for the wartime organization. Our Finnish Defense Forces wartime composition is 280,000 soldiers, and we are a country of 5.5 million. So it's a big military, and I would say this is the only way to get mass in the military is to have a compulsory military service. But I would also, and I'm going to argue that this is much more, that has big and deep and long-standing societal effects of having this service. All males in Finland, from the year they turn 18 until they turn 60, which means 42 years, they are conscripted so that they have to be present if the country needs military defense. So it's a 42-year sentence. I'm a general officer, so I won't get out when I'm 60. It's a life sentence for me. But everybody else in Finland, all the males, it's 42 years involvement in military defense as a conscript to be trained and then as a reservist. So the first part of this conscription or reservist system is the training part. So normally the young men come at their 20s, early 20s. They come in for military service that lasts, depending on what they are doing, from 5.5 months to 11.5 months. So it's half a year to a year that they will spend being trained in the military profession. And for this, they are paid €6.10 a day, which of course tells you that this is a cheap way of personal management. I'm not going to talk too much about all voluntary forces, but I have to say, when I've been looking what has been going on in Europe during the last 25 years, more than 20 countries stopping conscription and kind of big reserve system and moved to an all-voluntary force. This has meant that Europe has gone small, because I would say the all-voluntary forces have the one big problem of use it or lose it. They need to do something, and if they don't do it, the taxpayers are not going to keep up with that. But in our system, we train annually conscripts all the time. In my own brigade, Karelia Brigade, which is at the border of Russia, we get 2,000 new recruits twice a year. So we just got in January 2,000 new recruits. We are now training. We have a total of 3,500 soldiers that are training next to Russia to fight Russia. And when the next batch comes in July, they will do exactly the same. And we will do this year in, year out, which means that Karelia Brigade's wartime unit is much bigger than the 3,500 soldiers that we have under peacetime. We are approximately the size of UK's army, Karelia Brigade in wartime. But this is the kind of the basic system. You go as a conscript, you spend up to a year, and then you are trained, and then you go back to the reserves, which would mean back to the civilian life. And every once in a while, depending on what your task is in wartime, you come back with your own unit, your company or battalion. You come back for refresher training. It can last for 5 days, 12 days, 21 days, depending on which exercises you are going to be trained and what is the importance of your troop in the war fighting. So this all means that in the Finnish civil society, we have a little bit less than 1 million people in the reserves who have had military training between half a year to a year. So practically every household in Finland is a stakeholder in Finnish defense. And I would say this is the best and the most important thing about the conscription system. It's not sending these young 20-year-olds to war and fight and then die, but it's to have every household in Finland is a stakeholder in defense, and they have a kind of an interest, and they have the know-how, and they have the understanding of what is Finnish military and why do we need it, and what is the threat that is there on the other side. In my own family, I have 3 kids. In my own family, there are 3 of us who are doing or have done the kind of the conscription system. Of course, me, and then my 2 sons. The oldest one is 22, so he did it 2 years ago. He's now a reservist, a corporal in the ground-based air defense units, and my youngest son, who is 19, he'll start next January his journey. I don't know how long that's going to last. I hope it's a year, but it could be at the minimum 5.5 months. So the connection between Finnish defense, military defense, and the society is strong. And I think this is one of the main aspects of this compulsory military service. So everybody knows why the Finnish defense forces are spending their taxpayers' money. We just doubled our defense budget from 3 to 6 billion, and now we are talking about adding some more billions to it. And people approve. When we ask the people, do you think that the defense budget should be raised or keep at the same state or be lowered? A majority, about 70%, say it should be raised. And it's not just that we are war-crazy people or we have militarized the society, but people understand that because our citizen soldiers will defend this country, they need the tools to have a return ticket from the front if they have to defend this country. So it's not kind of outsourced to a certain military class that will do the fighting, and all the rest will stay at home waiting until the war ends, because this is something that would touch the whole society. And I must say that this kind of strong link between the Finnish society and the military is of course exemplified by having Russia as a neighbor. The last time we fought a war, it was Russia. For the last 100 years, all the plans that we had been fighting Russia, and now we are training to fight Russia if it starts it's kind of a military operation against Finland. So I think that the reasons are crystal clear, and everybody know them. When Russia annexed Crimea 2014, Gallup made a poll in Europe: would you fight for your country? They asked the same question throughout Europe. In Finland, 74% of the people said, yes, I would. 74. I have just, France, we hear 29. UK, 27. Germany, 18. And I think this kind of a connection between the society and the military was obvious back then, and it's the same these days. We do this same poll in the Finnish system, Finnish society every year. We have a special mechanism to do that. They fine-tune the questions, and they have long decades-old kind of series of how people have answered. And last time, 80% of the Finns answered the question: would you be willing to defend the nation even if the end result is uncertain? So 79%, almost 80% said yes, I would, and only 9% of the whole adult population was against it. So the second aspect of the Finnish kind of the mobilization culture, if I would say, is what we call today comprehensive security model, which in the good old days of the Cold War we call total defense, which was kind of the idea that if war comes, whole of the society and the businesses will turn their attention to the war effort and they will support the war-fighting functions of the country, so that the industry will start producing material related to war-fighting and so on. We started to change this outlook when the Cold War ended 35 years ago into not just taking care of war and war-related military threats, but looking at all the threats that make our kind of our critically vulnerable societies cause severe disruptions if these threats materialize. So it's much more, or it has been much more about non-military threats, but the military threats are included. So we have today, it's the government agencies led by ministries, it's businesses, so enterprises, and the third sector are together kind of preparing what are the threats to the vital functions of the society, and they do this round and round. So this means that there is this planning together, looking at the threat scenarios, the right countermeasures, and who is responsible for countering them. Which enterprises need to do what, for example, related to cyber threats of our daily connections and so on. They exercise together, meaning that we have exercises not only for the interagency, different authorities, but also taking into account the civilian life, the businesses, and the third sector, which is really important, looking at the Red Cross and so on and so on. And there is a kind of a clear division of labor, and also I would say kind of a division or responsibilities of who is in charge of different kinds of scenarios related to these threats. So, I would say that this comprehensive security model, as we have been doing this for decades and decades, it has kind of prepared a culture in Finland when preparing for the crisis in normal peacetime is a normal activity. So everybody does it, and even the businesses have a self-interest in doing this because of continuation management. If something happens, they want to be on top of it and get the kind of the repercussions as small as possible. So in a way, this is the mostly non-military aspect of mobilizing the society, and it's ongoing every day and every year. And practically every fourth year, there is a new cycle that starts and gives new responsibilities and kind of reignites joint planning and joint action between these authorities. So I would say that, based on all these two things, few final thoughts before I can end about societal mobilization, how the society thinks about, accepts, and acts kind of unanimously against threats, whether they are intentional foreign threats or whether they are just threats emerging in our critical societies. So I would say that what we need is cohesion and acceptance of the kind of taking care of these threats. So I would say that these two mechanisms that I described have made it certain that a vast majority of adult Finns know why we need to pay a little extra for our gasoline in order to have a secure gasoline supply also during crises, and so on and so on. There's also a demand from the society that we do our threat management well and also our defense well, just I stated that because we are sending citizen soldiers to defend the country. So these two mechanisms for cohesion, I think, are supported by two things that we also I can see in the Finnish society. I won't go any deeper. I just name them. First is a fairly good level of in our education system, so that people are well educated. Everybody. It doesn't matter what your status is. It doesn't matter what your background is. You get a pretty good education. This is especially important, I would say, for the information and hybrid threats, where somebody is trying to manipulate the society. So if people are well educated, I think this is the best kind of antidote for that. And the second aspect is what I would call a little bit in parentheses a kind of a modern welfare state, which means that we take care of people when they are having it tough. If people get unemployed, they need to get by for a certain period of time in order to get them back on their feet, because if they don't, they will become anti-establishment kind of agents, and they are then very susceptible to foreign interference. So with these notes, I'll be happy to share our experiences and talk about it a little bit later on.
Brilliant, thank you, General. One question that comes to my mind from that is a lot of Western countries that don't have conscription models, they still do look at reserve forces and they go, you know what, there's quite a lot of bang for my buck there. You know, it's good value for money. DSTL British studies found that, you know, reserve forces in whether it be cavalry or infantry regiments, they're a fifth of the cost of a regular unit. Do you think that countries that don't have conscription can still make good use of reserve forces to provide that critical mass, or do you think it's less effective if you don't have them full time to train them?
Yeah, I do think that it's possible to grow reserves in a kind of a meaningful way that they are credible. But of course, then it goes back to the kind of techniques of how you do that. But I would say that you can never skip the minimum training required for you to be proficient on the battlefield if you are a soldier in the reserves or in the active duty. So you have to make sure that once you start training reserves that are not based on conscription, the kind of the basic training for the task that you are going to do in the reserves, and when you're going to rise in the rank and in your proficiency over the years, I think that has to be kind of figured out pretty clearly, and you can't do that just in a few weeks or a few months. So it will take time.
No, brilliant. I think we'll move on down the line. So Greta, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Hamish. So it's really a pleasure to be in this interesting panel, and I would like to start with a statement that yesterday, actually, we commemorated the restoration of Lithuanian independence. 35 years ago, we restored our independence. And we know very well how much it costs to restore it, how much it costs to lose it. And we know the value and the virtue of this gift that we have gained ourselves 35 years ago when we became independent from the Soviet Union. So if you compare Lithuania 35 years ago and how it is now, it's really a dramatic, radical difference. Lithuania is now a prosperous, independent, free country that has modern society, that has innovations, that has defense industry, universities, people who enjoy their lives and who welcome guests coming to the country. And when we know what kind of value it has, we are ready to spend a lot to safeguard this kind of value. And in order to prove this, I can provide some numbers. For instance, last year for the defense budget, we allocated 3.11% of our national budget. And this year it's going to grow until 3.85% of national budget, GDP. The intention is to increase this budget between 5 to 6% until 2030. So from 5 to 6%, it should be in 2030 our budget. Meaning that this budget we are going to spend on our armed forces, on the defense procurement, on host nation support projects, on the infrastructure development, and what General was saying about the national resilience, societal resilience, and mobilization. Of course, Finland is the best example for us. And we really follow your advice. We consult with you, and this is what we are doing as well. So first of all, conscription service. It's already here in Lithuania, maybe not at the whole scale as in Finland, because due to restrictions of the infrastructure, we allow ourselves to call not all of the citizens, but it's obligatory when you get on the list. It's like a lottery to get on the list, but when you are on the list, it's difficult to escape from that list. I know from my own experience how we view the lists, and it's only for the men at this moment, but the discussion is going on. Perhaps it's worth including women and females, because in my personal opinion, I would be positive about this, because I think the whole of society concept, it says that all the people should know how to fight and how to deter the potential enemy or adversary. So this is already in place. We have professional, of course, armed forces. We have voluntary armed forces. Reserve is also very important. We need to regularly update their skills and competences and to invite them for the training and to show how to train with them together. And another component that we have is a paramilitary voluntary organization that is also that has many members. It starts from a very small age, from 12 years old. Children are already able to join this organization up to very solid age, and all of these people are involved into providing functions, providing services. Some of them are automatically involved into our defense plans in case of the crisis, and we understand that we need also to involve all of us in order to defend our country and to provide security to our country. Of course, we rely a lot on our partners on the international cooperation. We are NATO members, and we remain confident with the transatlantic bond, and we hope it to remain as it is at this moment. Of course, we all know the challenges that we are facing, and in the previous discussions they were touched upon. It's important. I really liked the name of this panel that said build, buy, borrow, bridge, because all of these words, they are saying something important. So yes, we need to build our societies so that they are resilient. So every person knows how they can be beneficial to our armed forces, how they are going to be involved in case of the crisis. Some of them will be using the gun. Maybe some of them will be using bread baking machine, just because they will need in crisis time to provide food to the soldiers. Some of them will be teaching the children, and mobilization system, it has to have the whole full picture. For that reason, we have our mobilization department that is in the hands of the Ministry of Defense. And the mobilization department has the full picture of the resources, of the armed forces, of everything what would be happening in case of the crisis. I think communication is also very important, because nowadays everything is so much connected. So we need to ensure that our citizens are well connected. We need to take and install the lessons what we learned in Ukraine, that society is mobilizing very fast and quickly when it has necessary tools. So we need to have them in place as well. We need to have defense industry in place. So for that reason, Lithuania, for instance, introduced a defense industry law last summer in July, in order to have industrial cooperation in place in case if we are procuring big-scale defense procurement, so that in this way we would develop our competences and skills in the area of defense industry, and we would be able to ensure chains of supply and security of supply. Then host nation support is also very important in case of Lithuania. We are looking forward to welcoming German brigade on the soil of Lithuania, and we view it as a very important project for NATO, for international cooperation, and for sending the signal to the enemy that the allies are supporting each other. French air policing mission was actually congratulating Lithuania yesterday and flying over the gathering of all the Lithuanians. And we view it also as a very important signal that our allies are on our soil, and they are helping us to deter the potential enemy. And last but not the least, I would like to quote my minister, who was giving an interview just very recently on the Fox News. And she was saying, like, if speaking to Russia or negotiating with Russia, you need to have a gun on the table. So, so I think every nation that is representing democratic world has to have a gun on the table, meaning that it has to have its developed resilience, societal resilience. It has to have enough of military capabilities. It has to have troops that know how to fight, how to exercise alone and together with the allies. It has to have the defense equipment that has possibility to be interchangeable with the allies' equipment, and we need to ensure interoperability. We need to have military mobility in between the Western worlds, so that we could be able to support each other in case of the crisis. And we need to understand that even if the countries such as Lithuania, Finland, Estonia, Poland that are on the eastern border, of course, they would be more immediately touched in case of the crisis. But I think in France, this kind of feeling is already here, that in case of the crisis, everybody would sense immediately the consequences of the crisis. In case if the frontier of NATO is breached, everybody would sense it immediately. And it's worth investing into defense now, not waiting for anything to happen later. Because the price that we would pay, all of us, all of our societies, even the southern societies, would be much higher than paying now enough of into defense and investing into defense. So thank you very much for this event, and I think it's very timely that France is taking this kind of leadership and initiative, organizing such event, and also very symbolical that is being implemented together with Russia.
No worries at all. Thank you very much. There's so much to unpack there. I mean, I definitely want to come to you on the question of, like, you know, countries on the frontier with Russia have this very obvious, clear mission purpose, because it's an existential threat. But then, as we're talking about during the last panel, if we want to, uplift a European capability, that requires a huge amount of commitment from countries a lot further back. So, for example, like France and the UK, which don't feel that existential threat in the same way. I mean, I remember seeing consistent polling in countries like the United Kingdom, where they put defence not in their top 10 priorities. People are talking about health and welfare and all these other things. So I'll leave this question hanging before we go to the professor. Just going to be very aware of time, but like something to think about is like, how do countries which are are on the frontier of the alliance, how do they try and motivate this mobilization in countries further away from Russia geographically? But anyway, I'll leave that one hanging, and I'll pass it over to the professor to provide us some challenge.
Thank you. Yeah, I hope I'll be providing a challenge. You were kind enough, Hamish, to mention some of my various fields of expertise. Probably the best way to define my approach is the title of a research group I was part of in the United States at UCLA, which was called Human Complex Systems, where you look at human societies in terms of their complexity, but also within one particular perspective, which is that of optimization of your effort. And in this case, when we're talking about conscription and mobilization, of course, the main question is numbers versus expertise. And this is probably shifting right now for a number of reasons. The fact that there's war on the ground in Europe is extremely concerning. It's a very kinetic, I would say, classical type of war. The way that Mr. Trump behaves currently is very, how would I say, concerning, to not to say more. But in terms of the things that are really changing, General Pelletier, a number of minutes ago, drew the attention about the Chinese doctrine in terms of war. He mentioned also General Gerasimov in Russia. It's very much China who is reshaping the way that we think about war in recent years. Of course, Gaza, Ukraine are more of the, let's say, unfortunately, like typical war that make a lot of casualties. China has been approaching things in terms of a silent war as far as Taiwan is concerned, and a war of paralysis of infrastructure. Possibly without any death, any casualty on the soil. Whenever that will happen, the way it's been prepared is there won't be any fights. Actually, it will be a paralysis of functioning of the island, and an invasion that hopefully wouldn't. I mean, in the Chinese mind, wouldn't make any casualties at all on the field. We've seen. That strategy of China being used elsewhere than within Asia. It was, I think it's about 3 or 4 years ago when the Americans realized that that operation through that group called Volt Typhoon had actually infiltrated all the grids, all the networks within the United States. I'm talking about information networks, communications, transport, energy, water grids, and supply chains. And the way it was done was an approach which was not even typical hacking, because it was using the tools that Microsoft had developed for the management of networks that was used. And that made it such that for a long time it was not visible at all. This morning in the group about China, I asked a question. I mean, I said, well, the Americans have produced a lot of literature about how compromised their grids are by the Chinese. There's an important, last year there was an important white paper. I asked if anybody knew this morning how much European grids are infiltrated, and I was told that if there was any information, it would be confidential, and that we would not know exactly what it is. But I find it unlikely it would be very different. So this is something that's happening. A war through paralysis of infrastructure. The other important new element that we've seen appear essentially since 2023, which is very recent, is the jump in artificial intelligence through large language models. There's a lot of talking currently about artificial general intelligence, which would be very much at the level of human beings, which is a somewhat theoretical question, because on all the benchmarks, the machines are already quite ahead of human beings. But the most important dimension is probably the agentic artificial intelligence, meaning autonomous systems. We've seen already some of them on the field, essentially in Israel, what is called, through a different number of names, robots, autonomous ammunitions, things of that type. There'll be a lot more of that, drones, of course, and there'll be a lot more of that very soon. The question that artificial general intelligence will raise is precisely the quality of the reasoning done by the machine. We've already, it's not recent, it was in 1642 that there was for the first time a calculating machine that was better than human beings. It was invented by Blaise Pascal. But since then there's been a lot of progress in that respect, machines being better than humans. But then with the top type of intelligence we have, it's very new that we have machines that do better than we do. And maybe the most concerning dimension of that is when the machine shows that it's reasoning better, but in a different ways than human beings. There's a famous move 2037. It's move 37 in Go, when the machine that was playing a champion, a South Korean champion, made a move that made everybody not wow at all, but say, how can that machine be so stupid? And that from that time, Move 37 has become one of the best in playing Go. The same with putting the queen in one of the corners on the chessboard. We're seeing that. We've seen recently, a couple of weeks ago, machines decided to speak to each other in some kind of gibberish modulated language because it goes faster than speaking with human words and things of that type. I think the uncertainty will be there essentially. We know also that there's a race. There's a race which being played very differently by the United States and China in that respect. We've seen recently the military coming on the board of OpenAI, Mr. Nakasone coming from the NSA. We've seen a lot of alliances between military firms, defense firms, and the artificial intelligence in the United States. But what we see in China is a totally different approach, going open source, going to Linux, which is that I would say torpedoing the American way of approaching things by letting these tools to go anywhere within the public, and that anybody can in his garage be developing an artificial intelligence of the which is better than human in making decision. So where does that leave us when we think now in terms of conscription and mobilization, with the I would say the scene changing so much in a war of paralysis of infrastructure. There are two elements which are essential. It is a cyber war as such, and it is infrastructure. And that raises that question about conscription and mobilization in terms of numbers versus expertise. Expertise will be needed for cyber force on the defensive side. I mean, to be able to find what systems are corrupted and to be able to monitor these systems on a permanent basis. The possibility that the enemy would actually have some success shows the importance of decentralizing, of a distributed resilience in society, because some parts of the networks may be compromised. In that perspective, redundancy becomes essential, and not only redundancy, but people being there in order to monitor and to repair. So ideally, what will be needed as reserves would be people with a double expertise, which would be to be very good at understanding networks, grids, cyber warfare, and also having a technical knowledge of how to be part of these SWAT teams that will deal with the monitoring and repair of the system. How does that leave countries to decide about conscription, possibly mobilization? It's difficult to tell, but we hear, we just heard it. Cross-board policies are very difficult to install, even within a structure like NATO. NATO being somewhat weakened in recent years. Distributed resilience and using people to, with the best of their knowledge, not only having an eye on who's good at computing, but also to make sure that people have access to that kind of education. So possible recommendations, possibly a compulsory technological service where the people have the talent and the sufficient background to be part of that unit. I understand that France has put something together like 2 days ago. I saw that in the news. Specialized reserves, of course, to be quickly mobilized, and probably maybe essential a national program of distributed civil and digital resiliency. Thank you.
General, you want to come straight back on that?
Yeah, concerning cyber expertise and conscription, I can't tell of another system that we in Finland could have all the best cyber warriors part of our reserves than conscription, because we got them all. So the people who are doing the coding for the best of companies who are earning millions that we could never pay them in from the Finnish Defense Forces budgets, they are all our reservists. So, you know, they are our reservists. When they come to refresher training and they do bad stuff with cyber, or they prepare to do bad stuff, they are not the infantry. So in a way, we get them all. And I think that is, for me, the only way that we can get the best minds of the Finnish society into our cyber troops, by having big reserves and everybody under law, mandatory service until they're 60. So for me, this is the answer to the expertise problem that you mentioned.
No, Greta, do you want to come in?
Yeah, just to add up on this, that in Lithuania, very, I would say, not very usual setting that we have. We have all the cyber service and cyber policy under the supervision of Ministry of Defense. And it means that we are responsible and accountable nationally for the cyber security of our country, of our infrastructure and implementation of the legal frameworks. Moreover, many voluntaries we have all in the military voluntary service who are with a cyber background, or in the paramilitary voluntary organization, where they train together and they exercise together with the militaries in order to develop the interoperability and competences together in order to counter any cyber threats. But still, I agree that cyber is going to be something that is it can highly tackle our everything, infrastructure, daily life. It can be a part of the hybrid attack. It can be an intro into something more serious. So cyber is going to be a component, and we need to pay enough attention to this component. AI, yeah, this is something very also important. For the military targeting, AI is being used. AI can be used for the organization of the logistics and these kind of technologies, and for many other tasks. And these kind of technologies we need to be introducing and including into our capabilities as soon as possible, because our adversaries, they are not waiting, they are ahead of us. And when we speak about Russia now in Ukraine, they are also, during this warfare campaign, they are also developing their capabilities and abilities to fight in the modern warfare conditions, because the warfare over there is different. It's not how we used to have the doctrine embedded after Second World War, and everything is changing. Autonomous machines are taking place. Drones are flying and attacking some objects. You cannot even take out your head from the trenches because you are afraid that you would be hit immediately by some FPV flying over your head. So, I mean, everything is different. We are not anymore at the same situation as we used to think about it. And therefore, for the small country as Lithuania, for instance, we need to rethink and to review how we're gonna fight and with what we're gonna fight, and how we are going to remain resilient if we are cut off from the networks, cut off from the communications, how we communicate inside of our country between our citizens, what kind of preparedness they need to have, what kind of emergency bag they need to have in case if they need to hide somewhere in the shelter. And I know Finland is much more advanced in this area, but I need to say that we are seriously thinking about this. And if to come back to this statement of negotiating with a gun on the table, so this is our gun. I mean, we are a small country, but we are doing everything so that our adversary would know that we are ready to fight back, we are ready to resist, and we will not give up easily.
Thank you you very much. I mean, it does remind me of something I've just read recently, which I found myself reading the slightly polemic new book from Alex Karp, the Palantir founder, and one of the points that he makes is, you know, how you take the very best and brightest in tech in America, and they're not plying their trade on, you know, matters of national defense or progress. They're doing it on video sharing apps and basically marketing ploys. And what we're hearing today is that, you know, shockingly, the power to compel people to work for national defense is quite useful. And that shouldn't be a shock, but I think it's worth stating. Now would be a great time, I think, we've got about 10 minutes left, or just under. Just turn to the audience, wonder if we have any questions. Do we have any questions? Yes. Gentleman there on my left.
Thank you, moderator. Thank you, all speakers. The question is to Lithuania, and it's about the degree to which Lithuania. By the way, I'm Michael McCloskey, formerly of National Defense University in Washington, D.C., now retired. To what extent is Lithuania collaborating with its fellow Baltic countries in order to accomplish economies of scale and some kind of mass in the North European area?
In terms of the defense procurement, for instance, I can bring up an example. HIMARS procurement from US. It was done collectively between the 3 Baltic states. Then, of course, we are cooperating with all our Nordic-Baltic format, NB8 format that exists, where we exchange information, best practices, experiences, policy planning, and views on the policy and how we view ourselves in this region. So Nordic-Baltic component, I think, it has a lot of potential. It has a potential to grow in case if something is changing in the global politics. I think this component could be one of the avenues that we would be focusing very strongly. The same as JEF component, which is not Nordic-Baltic, but is Joint Expeditionary Forces component, that also allows cooperation among allies that are focusing on certain tasks, objectives, and are willing to exchange their expertise and help each other to develop and to grow in the defense area. So what I would like to summarizing to say is that NATO, North Atlantic Bond, European Union, these are the formats that are very important, and we invest into them, we focus on them. Nevertheless, Nordic-Baltic cooperation is also very much on the table, and where we are very much closely engaging with each other.
I think we have probably room for one last question. And ideally a question for the whole panel as well. So the young man from King's College London, as he will tell us.
He needs a prize.
Hi, thank you. So Marla Sonic from King's College London. I have a question regarding the resilience and engagement of the younger generations. How do you assess the role of the impact of politicians, media, and social media in the willingness of the youth to engage in resilience and to defend the nations? I know that for France it's a big issue, but what about Finland and Lithuania?
Professor,
Thank you.
Do you want to kick off? Mike, come back to me.
Then later.
Well, the difficulty we have in the countries which are far from the potential first line of defense is the amount of the popularity of the populist types of parties, which are very close to taking power in our countries here. In France, one of the major press empire, that of Monsieur Bolloré, just appointed the former representative of RT to a major post within his press empire. It has not shown any remorse so far for sympathy for Mr. Putin. So that will be, I think, the importance of a favorable view of Russia in a country like France, when we'll be talking about mobilization and conscription. A number of people will think that we're on the wrong side, and I mean the governments are on the wrong side. Just see it in the reactions to the speech by Mr. Macron the other day, where it was far from being an unanimous response, favorable response to what he said.
I think there are a list of components. One is engaging with the young generation through the classes, lessons of the civil society, and raising children awareness from the very small age how it is important to have your own country independent. What can you do for your country? These classes are already in the curriculum of Lithuania, and this thing really works because you engage children in this topic. Second, I think conscription is a very strong element of developing the pride of of having your country strong, because one thing is when you look at the armed forces from outside, and there are different stereotypes, but once you go to serve for your country as a called conscript, your mentality and understanding can be changing very strongly. And this is what I heard from the witnesses of the young children, the young students who had this kind of course. Third, for the students who are already in the educational system, in the in the universities, we have a special course for the officers course, where they also have a possibility in the military academy to go through the course of how you lead the team, how you are you get all the competences as a young officer, and in case of the crisis of war, you could be also in the battlefield taking your position and providing the service. Paramilitary organization, voluntary organization, is also something that is helping to raise awareness in the society in different ages, saying how it is important why it is important to defend the country. And the last component, I think, leading by example. This is the strongest, because if your children are serving, if you show how you engage with your armed forces, if you are ready to fight for the budget for your armed forces, and you in transparent way you are investing the budget, and you show what kind of effect it has on the society, then it is